I'm Peter Higgins. I had the pleasure of having my own little checkbox on one of the JSConf speaker submission forms. Yeah, all of them, maybe. I don't know what it is that is compelling about me in particular that they want to hear. But this is Dojo already did that. It's a catchphrase that I've been saying for years and years and years now. It's not very funny. It's actually kind of depressing. So we're going to get into that. About me, JSConf alumni, I'm a former Dojo project lead. I am no longer actively contributing to Dojo. I probably still have write permissions, but I don't actually do anything. That's problematic. I'm a generic code monkey. My time as a project lead is much like this picture depicts. A professional cat herder. I actually list this on my various LinkedIn and on my resume and whatnot. It's true of any open source lead. If you own a project that more than 10 people are involved in, you're a cat herder. Doesn't matter what it is. It's a lot of work because cats are very agreeable. I've been busy. I left Dojo and kind of disappeared into being just code monkey because of my Princess Fluffy Butt. This is, I'm a new father and entirely elated about that. So that's where I've been. And welcome to JSConf. This is an epic thing that we've been doing here for some years now. If you see this guy anywhere around, thank him, give him a pat on the back, kick him in the shins or whatever it is. A lot of work goes into this. I like to think of this block as your digestive tract. Here we are finishing up your meals. You're going to sit and contemplate, and I'm not really going to do anything really technical. This is not going to blow your mind. It's just going to food for thought, light food for thought, and hopefully you will digest and innovate and continue on the spirit of JSConf of amazing, mind-blowing things. So the real talk here is called History of the World. It's not really Dojo already did that. It's kind of the history of my world and JavaScript and whatnot. I, this year, am celebrating 20 years of interwebs. I got my first dial-up connection in 1993 as a young lad at the ripe age of 13. I subsequently got kicked off the internet by the same ISP in 1994. But that's a whole long after-track story. I regained my internet. So what do we have? We have 1993, 1998 is kind of a dark age of the internet. It was, ooh, we've got dial-up. We don't have anything. This is awful. Lots of the best when viewed in started. I was still BBSing. I was a heavy BBSer from the age of 10 on. So that was more interesting to me than the internet at the time. But it kind of progressed on, and then people started using it. And then when the Y2K thing happened, that's when kind of like this whole pivotal thing happened. It seemed like the BBS software at the time, Renegade, just didn't want to fix their Y2K bugs, so they quit developing Renegade. So it kind of went on into me focusing more on the internet, seeing what was going on. It's 1999, right? So we got Ajax, we've got the beginnings of the browsers, the majors or whatever. Lynx was awesome because that was still a viable option. Unfortunately, it's not so viable these days. And then, of course, you have the granddaddy of most of the modern, the WebKits and the Chromes and everything that's derivative of that, Conqueror, which was pretty awesome in itself. Then 2001 to 2005, we kind of went through like a renaissance, right? Like Flash was everywhere. We'd already had, as we saw in the WebRTC, Remy made a comment that they already had access to the camera and they already had access to the microphone and stuff. And that's disheartening, right? Because Flash is everywhere. But in this time, the JavaScript people are doing, it's like the tail end of the DHTML amazingness where you've got the snowflakes and all the cool stuff coming down on the screen. And then that's when the JavaScript libraries started forming. It's like there's a thing here, and we can form whole libraries to make everything awesome. We got Scriptaculous and Prototype. Prototype was probably one of the first real libraries, solid, that is a derivative of all these things. Then we get into 2006, 2009. This is where my major contribution to Dojo really happened. I was a little bit before and a little bit after, but this is where the sweet spot is. And this is where there was a lot of fighting. And Angus Kroll did a great talk the politics of JavaScript, and he covered this really well. So you should go find that talk and watch this. But we'll double back here. This is where Dojo was doing things, but there was a lot of fighting. Seeing Andrew DuPont here now makes me think of a particularly funny thing where Alex Russell was ranting. He's another former Dojo project lead, and he's ranting, prototype fucking sucks, you shouldn't use this, whatever, and it kind of created this rift, right? And then here at the tail end of this, 2009, Chris comes in and says, I'm going to publicly shame you if you start arguing with people, if you don't offer meaningful solutions, and if you don't help. You're a part of the problem rather than a solution. So we're in the modern era now, right? It starts about 2010. It's going forward. This is where all the amazing stuff, this is a link to Angus's talk. I stole this slide completely. I was like, oh, I don't want to have to go find my own logos. But he left off a lot of people and a lot of little projects and stuff. But this is like an age of enlightenment. This is great. We've got all of this great technology right here at our fingertips. But where did it come from, right? So what did Dojo do during all this time is the question. This one, I spent 4 years of my life defending. This, to the standards, to the zealots or whatever, this is a fate worse than death. It was like I shot it on your grave or whatever. It's like one attribute, Dojo type. All it was doing under the covers was look at the attribute, find the string, get an object based on that, and new it up. And the props are other node attributes that were there. So, okay, cool. HTML5 comes along, and hey, the data prop. It vindicated everything Dojo's going to do. So let's just go change that to data Dojo type. Problem solved. No one's going to complain. Same stuff. New class, new prop, node. But why not use dataset, right? Because this is HTML5. This is the future. This is amazing. But in order to use dataset, we have to test for dataset because we support browsers that don't have dataset. So we do. We do a little quick feature test. That's 4 lines of code to add to our thing. And then we have to write a shim around it because if you're using props, it does this mixed case thing where the prop is actually, when it's on the dataset, it comes as like the CSS to JavaScript CSS. And so we end up with this, and we've got our native branch, which is, hey, that's pretty cool. Just return the stuff, and then we've got all this transforming. And so we've got like 1, 2, 3 depths of function calling just to do something for a data set. But why not, in the end, it's all just get attribute. That's how it worked. Like it worked with the Dojo type, it worked with whatever attribute was there. The spec never said explicitly ignore, it just said don't do anything with attributes we don't know. So it wasn't really invalid, the whole Dojo type thing. But in the end, back to just get attribute, this is way too much for just looking up an attribute. And so we also had the backwards compatibility, which was always very important to Dojo, that the Dojo type would still keep working. So in the end, why have the wrapper for something that was just going to go back to a get attribute when all you had to do was detect if the data Dojo type was there, use this new way, but still use the get attribute. And if you're unfamiliar with what the Dojo type attribute does in the first place, it's very, if you use Backbone, just passing the node to the element and creating a new instance of a thing right there in the place in the DOM. So using the DOM to store the data and the definition of things, Dojo did early on. And then, of course, Bootstrap with it. But I actually, honestly, I find 2 things wrong with this. With the Bootstrappy one, the spec recommends, I guess, it's not set in stone that you prefix your data attributes if you are a library or doing anything. So the data Dojo type was intentionally added the Dojo in there because of that, right? Or I guess the example in the spec was doQuery and Jojo. I forget, but they referenced those libraries specifically. But it's just a way of accessing data upon the node. So that's cool, right? We did something right. But we did it wrong to begin with. And we did this wrong to begin with, too. And this is a really, really heated argument. Module loading. Has anyone ever written a module loader? Nice. Do you still use it? No. Okay. So really, it's a module loader is just we've determined through years of trying that it's really just injecting scripts, right? So these are a lot of injected scripts. This is actually off of my airline website. I just happened to, it's like, oh, a random page, US Air is up. This is a nightmare. And this has got to be generated because I don't know why it has to be generated actually, because there might be someone that actually typed all this stuff out. But you notice they're using jQuery 1.5, which is 4 orders old, technically. But I bet it's because this 17th one down here doesn't support whatever the next, the 1.7 APIs of jQuery. So this is a nightmare. We need module loading in JavaScript for anything bigger than just your little demo page that has some flying. So we created it. Early Dojo supported a concept of packages where you could pass in a wildcard. But it wasn't really magical, or it wasn't anything special, right? The asterisk just meant load up package underscore underscore or dunder package. Because we didn't have a way to do dir indexes. We can't like look into the file system and see, hey, what files are in this? We can't do import from. So we decided this is a great idea, but the fact that it was just dunder package was like a level of indirection that just made it stupid. Why not just have it an explicit package, like name it? So we did. You Dojo require foobar baz, and then add-on load is kind of document ready, but it wrapped around the module system, right? So and then you get the global object. That's amazing. But what's really happening is ugly. We just didn't know, right? So it starts out foobar baz, synchronous XHR. We do a path lookup, figure out where this is configured to live, sync XHR it, and then eval it right there in place. And then so foobar baz here, all of them had to do a provide, which creates the global object at that place. And oh, we got another require, so we got to loop back to the synchronous XHR and keep doing this recursively until we hit the end of our thing, fire add-on loads, and we've got a bunch of, there was no way to avoid blocking the UI with this. It was, no matter if it was 1 file or 4 files or whatever, even with a build, you still had that blocking during the transport of synchronous XHR, even if you put it at the foot of the page. So sync XHR also had same origin policy limitations, which is absurd because the script tag doesn't. So we were kind of imposing this short-sighted thing on everybody. And of course, Crockford tells us eval is evil. So we shouldn't do that either. But this guy, James Burke, who is out here somewhere, you can clap for him, I like him. We're friends. He was the core Dojo project lead at the time. He did all of the loader work, and he kind of got burnt out on the politics of trying to herd the cats and keep everything in line and keep everything normal and backwards compatible, and so he kind of left us and decided to start this project called Requiredjs. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's cool. It's actually directly, it's a copy paste of the Dojo X domain loader, which James also wrote as part of his work at AOL for and with Dojo. So we came up with this, oh, here's our solution. We'll create some kind of global object that when we inject the script, it's just wrapped in this. It's wrapped in this function, and we'll define the module wrapped inside this function. So no matter what the original code was, it gets wrapped around this other thing. And then it had a little has resource check to prevent duplicate execution of the same module and whatnot. But this is really not pretty, but this was generated. This is the build system generated this for the X domain case, which was what allowed us to put it on the CDNs. It was one of the, unless you were a single file library, there was really no need to be on a CDN if you were a single file library, but once you get bigger or more than one part, you need to be able to communicate or to load different resources. So this is the solution we came up with, which actually ended up being the foundation of AMD. the concept of single function to register, define, and do everything, and then the function body of whatever it was is the module. So he took it a next step, created anonymous modules, and took the return value of whatever it is that function did based on its dependencies. So you get this, no longer are you foobar baz, you're whatever your path mapping comes out to be, and then you get back whatever single object it is that you intended to get. So you can work with that independently and nicely. So, and it's also asynchronous. It didn't block the UI thread anymore because it was just sending these things off and everything was compartmentalized. So every part that comes back, eventually when everything comes back, it triggers. So that's good. No UI blocking, super fast. And then this is what it ended up looking like. So I find it quite nice. I do have a problem when it gets into, when you have 10 or 15 or 20 or any more than 10, I guess, modules that you need to load, you end up with a really, really long opening line. And it's not pretty. So you can break it onto new lines, you get all this different syntactic stuff, and whatever makes you happy. But the alternative is and the alternative that Node is presenting to the browser versus backend thing is, oh, just go back to synchronous XHR and eval. Like, why not just treat our require dot or require whatever, load that up in the browser, synchronous XHR and eval, because that's the only synchronous part about Node, is, or minus the sync functions. So we came up with AMD. Hopefully AMD sticks. Hopefully more and more people buy into it or find the utility in it in making anything more than just their little demo apps. So modules are coming to JavaScript. I don't know that it's been approved. If anyone wants to yell and tell me that it has, like there's a final spec, I don't believe there is. I think they're still arguing. And then UMD makes me cringe every time I see it. Thankfully, UMD is a copy-paste from a repository of 70 different options of types of module use that I can use. And nowadays, my shop, my work has been using a lot of jQuery and Backbone and all of those other great technologies. So I just fork whatever plugin it is, add the UMD thing, and then go start fixing their code. So not happy with UMD, but I wish more people used it. If you're not familiar with this, you really should look. It's a mess of factory functions and tricking ifs into thinking something else is the global. And we can't agree on this, but we need to. And really, it's just something Dojo already did. So a lot of the problems that AMD solves, and solves very elegantly, were through years and years and years of James's work with Dojo and backwards compatible. I think that's what finally, the straw that broke the camel's back was the backwards compatibility, because we had to migrate our entire code base to AMD while still maintaining support for Require or Dojo Require directly as a synchronous assumed loader. Another thing Dojo's been doing forever is backend JavaScript. And everyone's, oh, 2009, Node came out. This is great. Node is awesome. We have JavaScript on the back end, but we've always had it by way of Rhino. And not to say that Rhino is good or anything. We had it. It was, the entire build system was written in JavaScript to concatenate JavaScript, with the exception of ShrinkSafe, which was also using our custom Rhino. So we're shipping around Java stuff and whatever. It's nice to get away from Rhino, which is horribly slow. And it also reeked of Java. Even just the APIs, you still had to write JavaScript as if it were Java when you wanted to go into the file I/O stuff, and it was just very, very unpretty. Even passing strings back and forth. If it was a Java originated string, it was a special string, and you had to cast it to a JavaScript string by using plus quote Dojo build tool. And then another thing that I'd love to see really, really take off, we had something called Dojo X DTL, which is a Django templating language. Django was popular way back before, or it's probably still very popular. I don't use it now. But we had a full implementation of the DTL language. I'd love to have seen some kind of express app or something that comes out and just straight up says you can use your templates in the back end or the front end. We can either, using the exact same templates, exact same data models, everything, which is really, really now a possibility with Node. It's right there on the cusp of happening. I did a mustache thing, proof of concept using just a simple Node web server, but I never really followed. So when we dropped Rhino, Dojo's build is using Node, and DTL was abandoned. But there's no end to Node's potential, and likewise, everyone should be very, very excited about it. It hasn't gestated yet. It's not to the Python levels, and a lot of the modules that you get you can't be sure. NPM is hit or miss. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of gems, but there's a lot of crap, and that's just, I guess, the way of the world. It'd be nice if there was a good, clean solution to loading all of that stuff. UI libraries, which is one of Dojo's biggest things that it was the monolithic core library plus a UI library plus plugins. So everyone kind of has a UI library. There's several out there. Digit is Dojo's. I could do a whole other hour talk based on the failures and the decisions behind various things that happened in Digit. Digit is a wonderful little UI library, but I can tell you what it does do. It gives you instance-based control. You get the new up your thing and programmatic object-oriented access to everything. And then the DOM-based view is really just a wrapper around all of that. Externalizing resources by way of now AMD text plugin, keeping your templates out of the JavaScript code itself. Interestingly, the script for the jQuery templates, script type jQuery/template. Interesting browser thing, if it's not text JavaScript, don't execute it. So we could use these containers for completely arbitrary HTML that never rendered whatsoever. So that's a big, I don't like it. I never liked it when Digit did it, but they didn't do it so much for the templating, they did it for methods. So you could actually write script type equals dojo on, and then that code inside of there would replace the instance method for whatever it is you're doing. So it was really ugly. I don't like putting my JavaScript in the HTML. And one thing that Digit does that nobody has done, and Digit's done this for years and years, I don't know how much money IBM has put into accessibility, but accessibility is huge. And a lot of people just kind of disregard it. They outline none, display outline none or whatever on anchors because they don't like that little dotted box around their anchor elements. When you click it, somebody needs that. Localization, internationalization, both out of the box. Alex has a great new solution to internationalization. I don't really like Dojo's internationalization, but it's built in. It's all part of it. It's something we learned and something that we needed. So it's there. It's been there for a long time. Another thing with Digit, to painful degrees, it's backwards compatible. We started out with functions like set disabled and set left-hand side something, individual functions for everything. It's like, that's not going to scale. We're going to have millions and millions of methods that are either set or get or whatever. So let's go to a setter, just a straight set adder. And then that ended up being renamed to just set. And now it's been replaced with observable and watchable patterns. And so, but the benefit there is that you don't have to really think. Back to my jab earlier about jQuery 1.5 and the plugins that were listed there, there's no way of knowing if any of that stuff works. I guess there is now with the modern plugin repository. I don't actually look at jQuery very much, but I believe there's a versioning system in some kind of package.jQuery thing that they've got going on. But there's a benefit to unifying everything, to normalizing names of functions and styles of names of functions, because once you get past like a threshold of understanding the terminology or the workings, it's all comes clear. Instead of the various jQuery plugins, like, oh, I have to do .this, and sometimes I have to call it, and sometimes I need to reinitialize it on a collection or whatever. There's no unification between any of the plugins or any of the libraries that you piece together to develop. And I'd like to see more standards there on naming conventions and API on the interfaces, right? There's been a little bit of work when you look at something like Bootstrap. If you actually look at the Bootstrap JavaScript code, some of it's really, really horrible, but some of it all follows a very simple pattern of here's a simple class, and then the plugin side of it is do this, do this, do this, do this, reload our plugin. So it's instantiation from an object or string-based commands from that, and it's already saved on the object. So that's cool. I'd love to see more style guides for individual modules, and I'd love to see more of them AMD-ized, so you can just take and pick. So you don't need necessarily, because a lot of jQuery plugins, for instance, don't even really need jQuery. It's just a function stubbed off of a $sign in the end. Likewise with just stubbing a function that works on a collection. It's really literally just stubbing a function that works on a collection that iterates over itself. Digit could do a lot of stuff better. They don't have a concept of event delegation, which is odd. I mean, internally it has this connect, so you can listen to events within the scope of yourself and it cleans up after itself, but it never had like a straight up delegation API, which would have been beautiful. I actually kind of like that about Backbone, minus the fact that events object, if you're inheriting, you have no control over the parent events necessarily. I might be mistaken on that, just in experience. And alternate templating. I find the digit templates, they're very flat, they're very nothing about them. It's just variable substitution. And I've got more complex data than that, and I don't need to write one off. So it's 2 lines of code. I implemented Mustache, which was fun at the time, until I learned that they don't support dot notation. Oh, he's not even looking. I was trying to, it's all right. And then, and then Core.js, which is all Dojo really started out to be. Just a bunch of functions, a bunch of hackers getting together and like, oh, hey, we need a normalized isArray. Or, oh, that's a bad example. That slipped. Yeah, so the isArray is not a good example. What's a good example? Bind. Stuff you find in underscore. That's a great example. There's a lot of stuff that's in underscore that I took for granted because it's always just been attached to Dojo. It's been there. This is the tie to go with jQuery's tux, but only because jQuery's tux is missing a tie. It's like my favorite jQuery API is map, because the $ map and the $FN map aren't the same. It's actually more of a map filter. And then Cody Lindy, who may or not be here, called me out on it. He's like, why would you ever need something that maps down to a sparse array? And I was like, well, in case you ever have 10 things and you want to make sure they line back up later. Or bind. It's an event handler in jQuery. It confused so many people. It's like, oh, hey, ECMA 5 start doing this new fancy binds in that. Use that. I'm very confused. What does this have to do with event handlers? You know, but it's impossible to even explain the concept of bind to the avid jQuery user because their this is something completely different than the rest of our thises. And this is the most important thing. Literally this is the most important thing in JavaScript in my eyes. It's just the ability to control the context and do whatever it is you want, whatever it is you need to do. And having an understanding of this is good. Each. It just frustrates me so much. Oh gosh, the fact that in order to iterate over a jQuery collection, you have to you end up reinstantiating a this jQuery object within itself, rather than working directly on the node. And then the key value pairs are all. There's no way to get the original collection. It's just so angering, so angering. I'm actually running really short on time, so I'm going to go. Underscore is not AMD UMD ready. It doesn't even have a UMD shim. plug for John Dalton, Lodash does. It's just a matter of a quick build, and you get an actually faster than underscore compliant underscore in your underscores. Yep, I heard you like underscores. I actually hate using the underscore as an API because it makes it look like I've already obfuscated my code. It's like, have you ever called a dynamic method off of an underscore? It's a underscore bracket conditional question mark string colon string, and and then you pass a jQuery collection to that, and it's a $sign right after a parentheses, and it's just like, what the fuck did I just write? And then you step back and you add a couple spaces around some things, and it's okay, hey, I can kind of see. Or you start adding new lines after the parentheses, and the parentheses of the new squiggle. So lots of stuff isn't AMD ready. As I mentioned, I'd love to see more. But in the end, again, it's just JavaScript. Dojo did so much stuff, and Dojo wrote so much JavaScript. There's date normalization. There's deferreds, which is the early onset promises, which are now also in jQuery, which everyone loves. And like, you would have been amazed at the time when jQuery first announced support for deferred, and they were like, everybody was like, this is amazing. This is great. We need to, promises are the fucking shit. And then I just one-handed clap, we've been doing it forever. It's like, I'm proud of all of you for using that, but it's nothing new. So understand the language, enjoy the nuance, don't buy into any particular library other than the immediate goals that library serves. And just write code and continue learning. And that's all I've got.